The restaurant was full of people who thought they mattered. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, soft piano music drifting through the air. Daniel had reserved the whole back section for 12 of his most important colleagues. He told me to wear something nice and to smile and not say too much. I wore the blue dress he once said made me look like someone worth knowing. I smiled at everyone. I laughed at the right moments. Then, between the main course and dessert, my husband of 8 years slid a thick envelope across the table toward me. I looked down. I looked up. Daniel's face was calm. Not angry. Not sad. Just calm, the way a person looks when they have already decided something and feel no regret about it. "Divorce papers," he said. Not quietly. Loudly enough for the whole table to hear. 12 people stared at me like I was a problem they were glad wasn't theirs. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at the papers. Then I looked at him. Daniel kept talking after he said the word divorce. He said he was tired. Tired of explaining myself to people who expected more. Tired of pretending I still belonged beside him. He said I had grown comfortable, that I had stopped pushing forward, that I was holding him back from the life he deserved. The room was so quiet I could hear the candles burning. Then he said the word that made everything inside me go still and cold. Ordinary. He said it simply, like it was a fact and not a wound. The table stayed silent. I let the quiet last for 3 full seconds. Then I turned my head slightly and saw her. Vanessa. She was standing just behind Daniel's chair, wearing a necklace I recognized immediately because I had helped him choose it 2 years ago for a business gala. She smiled at me. Not warmly. The smile said she had already moved into the space where I used to live. I looked back at Daniel. Picked up a pen. I signed the 1 page confirming I had received the papers. Then I folded my napkin neatly, set it on the table and said, "I hope you know what you just gave away." I stood up slowly. My chair made a small sound against the floor. Then I walked out. Not fast. Not stumbling. I walked like a woman who had somewhere important to be. The cold night air hit my face when I pushed through the restaurant doors, and I stood on the pavement for a moment just breathing. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me a little. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 34 years old, and for 8 years I had been the invisible engine behind my husband's company, Reeves and Company. Everyone called Daniel a visionary, but I was the one who built his first investor pitch deck from scratch at 2 in the morning. I was the one who corrected his risk models, saved 3 failing client accounts, and rewrote the strategy plan that kept the company alive through its worst year. Daniel stood in the spotlight because I made sure the lights worked. What Daniel did not know was that 6 months before that dinner, I had already started preparing for the day I might need to prove all of it. I had started saving documents, quietly, carefully, in a private cloud folder I had labeled simply, "In case Daniel forgets." The folder had been growing for 6 months by the time Daniel slid those papers across the white tablecloth. Emails, draft presentations, financial models, strategy memos with my name buried in the metadata. I had started saving them quietly after I noticed something changing in Daniel. He had begun speaking over me in meetings. He had stopped mentioning my name when people praised his work. He had started spending more time with Vanessa, who handled his public relations. At first I told myself it was stressful. Then I told myself it was a phase. Then one evening I came home early and saw a message on his laptop screen I was never meant to read, and I understood it was neither. I did not confront him that night. I went into the study, opened my private drive and saved 3 more files. I told myself I was being careful, but somewhere deeper I knew I was building something. A record. A history that belonged to me and could not be erased just because someone with a louder voice decided I had never existed. By the time of the divorce dinner, that folder held 93 files spanning 8 years. I had everything I needed. I had known I would need it long before Daniel reached for that envelope. The morning after the dinner, Vanessa posted a photo on social media. Daniel's hand rested near the envelope on the table, and she leaned close beside him. Her caption read, "Some men finally choose ambition over average." I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and made tea. Within the hour my phone was full. Old friends who hadn't called in months sent worried messages. Former colleagues sent screenshots. People I barely knew wrote things like, "I always thought something was off about him." I did not reply to a single one. I understood what those messages were. They were people drawn to drama, not people drawn to me. I waited until the notifications slowed. Then I opened my phone, went to messages, found the contact I was looking for, and forwarded Vanessa's post with no comment attached. The contact was Marcus Vale. I set my phone down and finished my tea. 11 minutes later my phone buzzed once. I looked at the screen. 5 words. "Then we move faster, Claire." I set the phone down again. I had known Marcus would say something like that. It was why I had sent it to him and no one else. Marcus Vale was not someone Daniel's world truly knew. Everyone knew the name. He was the founder of Valebridge Holdings, a firm that acquired and restructured companies across multiple industries. Daniel had been trying to arrange a meeting with Marcus for nearly 2 years. He had sent letters, used connections, and paid consultants for an introduction that never materialized. What Daniel did not know was that Marcus and I had a history that had nothing to do with him. I had met Marcus 8 years earlier before Daniel's company existed, when I was a corporate analyst fresh out of graduate school with more ambition than contacts. He had spoken at a finance conference I attended, and I approached him afterward with a question detailed enough that he invited me to coffee the next morning. That coffee turned into a mentorship that lasted years. When I married Daniel and stepped back from my career to support his company, Marcus and I stayed in quiet contact. He knew what I was doing behind the scenes at Reeves and Company. 6 months before the divorce dinner, I had sent Marcus an analysis of several distressed companies worth considering for acquisition. Reeves and Company was on that list not because Daniel was brilliant, but because the systems I had built were still holding it together. I met Marcus at a small restaurant far from Daniel's neighborhood, the kind of place with no valet parking and no chance of being seen by anyone who would report back. Marcus was already seated when I arrived. He stood when I walked in. We ordered coffee. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Tell me where things stand." I told him everything. The dinner, papers, Vanessa's post, the folder I had been building for 6 months. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "The systems you built are still holding that company together. Daniel cannot run what you built. He only knows how to take credit for it." I asked him what he wanted to do. He opened a folder on the table between us. Inside was a Valebridge acquisition review template, partially filled in. He slid it toward me. "I want you to finish this," he said. "Your name goes on it as strategic advisor." I looked at the folder. Then I looked at Marcus. He did not rush me. He sat quietly and let me think. Picked up my pen. I pulled the folder toward me. I wrote my name on the first line of the advisory section and handed it back. Marcus looked at my name on the page. Then he closed the folder and said, "Good. Now we begin." While I sat in that quiet restaurant across town, Daniel was returning to his office expecting to be admired. He had informed his team about the divorce in polished, confident terms and framed it as a personal decision made with strength and clarity. Most employees said very little in response, because they had watched me work for years and understood more than Daniel realized. The first crack appeared quickly. His CFO, a careful man named Patrick who had been with the company since year 2, flagged an irregularity during a routine billing review. Several client invoices had been adjusted in ways that did not match the original signed agreements. The differences were not enormous, but they were consistent. In finance, consistency is what turns a mistake into a pattern. Daniel dismissed it. He told Patrick it was probably a transition error and to let the junior staff sort it out. Patrick said he would look into it. What Patrick actually did was quietly pull 3 months of records and compare them to older files. He found the same kind of adjustment appearing again and again, all of them recent, all of them connected to account access that had been given informally to someone who was not on the official staff list. Patrick sat with that information for 2 days before he told Daniel what he had found. Vanessa had been given informal access to certain company systems 2 months before the divorce dinner. Daniel framed it as helping her understand the business. She had no formal role, but she had a login to the client management system, and she had been making small changes she did not fully understand. She thought she was helping. She was adjusting numbers she believed were flexible. They were not flexible. They were contractual. When Daniel was told the full picture, he panicked privately but acted publicly like everything was managed. He called a junior analyst into his office and implied, without saying it directly, that the errors were connected to that person's work. The analyst said nothing in the meeting. But that evening he sent me a message. His name was Kwame. He had been with Reeves and Company for 3 years. He was 26 years old, careful with records, and loyal to people who treated him with respect. I had always treated him with respect. His message was short. "You told me to save everything." "I did." I replied with 2 words. "Thank you, Kwame." Then I forwarded his message to Evelyn Hart, my attorney, with a note that said we might need this soon. Evelyn replied within the hour. She said to keep it safe and to ask Kwame if he would be willing to provide a formal written statement. My best friend Naomi Brooks had been the HR director at Reeves and Company for 4 years before she resigned the previous spring. She left because Daniel had started replacing experienced people with staff who flattered him and did not ask difficult questions. When she raised concerns about how certain employees were being treated, he smiled and told her the company was evolving and not everyone could evolve with it. She handed in her notice 2 weeks later. Naomi and I had been friends since university. She had watched from inside the company as I quietly built things Daniel claimed as his own. When I called her the evening after Kwame's message, she picked up on the first ring. We met that night at a small cafe near her apartment. She was already at a corner table when I arrived, and there was a folder on the table before I had taken my coat off. She pushed it toward me. "I wasn't sure when the right time was," she said. "I think it's now." Inside were emails, staff complaints, exit interview records, payroll adjustments, and reports that had been officially filed and then quietly shelved. I looked up at Naomi when I finished reading. She looked back at me steadily and said, "Claire, this stopped being just your marriage a long time ago." I closed the folder. I agreed with her completely. I sat with Naomi's folder for a long time after she went home. I spread the documents across my kitchen table and read through everything slowly, the way I used to read. Financial reports at 2 in the morning when Daniel needed them fixed before a board meeting. The picture that formed was not only of a husband who had erased his wife. It was the picture of a company built on silence. Loyal employees pushed out. Complaints filed and shelved. Records adjusted. People who asked too many questions were replaced by people who asked none. Daniel had not just treated me as invisible. He had built an entire organization where invisibility was expected from anyone who wasn't him. I thought about the years I spent fixing things so carefully that no one ever saw the problem. I thought about the board member who praised my recovery plan, and Daniel's hand on my back, and his voice saying I just helped him organize things. Everyone laughed politely, smiled too. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with Naomi's folder and my private drive open on my laptop, I understood something clearly for the first time. I had not simply been building his company. I had been building evidence. And the time to use it had finally arrived. Daniel's lawyer sent the first settlement offer 4 days after the dinner. It was a carefully worded document that added up to one simple message. I had contributed nothing. It described me as a non-operational spouse with no strategic involvement in Reeves and Company, and it offered the bare legal minimum in spousal support. I read that sentence twice. Then I read it a third time. I set the document on the coffee table, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, came back and sat down. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. I laughed because Daniel had just made the worst possible legal decision available to him. He had put the lie in writing. He had signed his name to a document that could now be placed, point by point, alongside 8 years of emails, drafts, timestamps, and financial models that showed exactly who had done the work. I called Evelyn that evening and read her the key passage. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Send it to me tonight. I'll have our response ready within the week." Her response, when it came, was a formal request for full discovery of all company records from every year Daniel claimed I had played no role. For the first time since the dinner, I heard that Daniel had gone pale reading a document that wasn't his own. Daniel panicked when the discovery request arrived at his lawyer's desk. Not visibly. He was too practiced at controlling his expression. But the people closest to him said he started arriving at the office earlier and leaving later. He asked his assistant to pull old files. He had private conversations that ended quickly when anyone walked past. Vanessa pushed him to announce their relationship publicly before the divorce was finalized. She had already told her friends and her family, and she wanted it posted and permanent. Daniel agreed because he believed confidence could be worn like armor. The announcement went out on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, one of Reeves and Company's largest clients had sent a formal letter putting their contract renewal on hold, citing concerns about leadership stability and governance. Daniel told his team I had made calls. He was certain of it. He told anyone who would listen that I was quietly running a campaign to damage him. He was wrong. I had not contacted a single person. I had not sent one message to any of his clients. What Daniel could not accept was the far simpler truth. His own behavior was doing the damage. His clients were watching and forming their own conclusions without any help from me at all. Marcus called me on a Thursday morning and asked me to come to his office. He had a tall corner space in a quiet building in the financial district, the kind of room that suggested wealth without announcing it. He was standing at the window when I arrived. He turned and pointed to the chair across from his desk. He stayed standing. "Veilbridge is ready to move forward with the full acquisition review," he said. "But only if you come out of the background completely. I need your name visible. I need your analysis formally attached to the process." I had expected to stay just off to the side of the main picture, where I had spent most of my adult life. I told him I needed to think about it. He nodded. He did not push. He walked to his desk and sat and looked at me steadily. "Staying hidden served a purpose once," he said. "That purpose is finished. Stepping forward will cost you. It will mean admitting how much of yourself you gave to a man who erased you." He paused. "But staying erased is also a choice. And I don't believe it's the one you want to make." I looked out the window at the city below. I thought about my kitchen table and all those documents spread out in the lamplight. Then I looked back at Marcus and said, "Put my name on it." The Veilbridge acquisition notice arrived at Reeves and Company on a Monday morning. Daniel read the first page and felt something close to relief. Marcus Vail. Veilbridge Holdings. The name he had been chasing for 2 years had finally come to him on its own. He called his assistant in and told her to clear his afternoon. He began drafting a response about shared vision and mutual opportunity. He told Vanessa over lunch that things were turning around. He told his CFO to stop worrying. Then his assistant brought him page 3 of the notice and set it on his desk quietly. Daniel read it once, then again. His face changed in a way his assistant had never seen before and never forgot. In the middle of page 3, listed clearly under the heading Advisory Team for Acquisition Review, was a single name, Claire Bennett, Strategic Advisor. He sat completely still for nearly a full minute. The woman he had called ordinary at a public dinner, in front of 12 colleagues, with her replacement standing behind his chair, was now formally listed as a key advisor in the acquisition of his company. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. His lawyer did not answer on the first try. Daniel called again immediately. Evelyn filed our formal response to the settlement offer on the same week the acquisition notice was delivered. She had spent 2 weeks preparing it with great care. The response rejected every claim in Daniel's settlement document and included an attached index of evidence, 93 files spanning 8 years organized by category and date, strategy documents, financial models, email chains, presentation drafts, client recovery plans. Each file included metadata confirming the author, the creation date, and in many cases a full version history showing my edits layered beneath Daniel's final submissions. Evelyn had also included 7 sworn statements from former Reeves and Company employees who described what they had witnessed firsthand. Kwame's account was among them. So was a statement from a former senior analyst who described watching me rewrite an entire investor pitch deck over one weekend while Daniel attended a conference and later presented the result as work produced by his internal team. Daniel's lawyer called Evelyn the day after receiving the response. The call lasted less than 10 minutes. Evelyn told me afterward that the lawyer sounded like someone who had just discovered the room was considerably smaller than he had believed. The second settlement offer arrived 6 days later. It was different, but not yet different enough. A Reeves and Company board meeting was held on a Wednesday afternoon to address what was being carefully called governance concerns. Daniel had requested the meeting to reassure the board and reframe the narrative before the acquisition review moved forward. He prepared a presentation. He wore his best suit. He walked in ready to perform. The board asked questions he had not prepared for. Who created the original acquisition readiness plan from year 4? Why did 3 separate strategy files in the company archives carry file names with the initials CB? Who had developed the financial recovery model from year 3 that the board had approved and which had kept the company solvent through its hardest quarter? Daniel answered carefully. He said those projects had been team efforts, that he had provided direction and ideas, and that various people had assisted with formatting. A board member named Franklin, who had served since the company's 2nd year and who chose every word with deliberate care, leaned forward slightly. He said, "That's interesting, Daniel. I remember attending a presentation in year 3 where Claire walked the board through that recovery model in full detail while you sat beside her and took notes." The room stayed silent for a long moment. Daniel smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Things between Daniel and Vanessa had been shifting quietly for weeks. She had begun looking more carefully at his finances after the client contract pause, and the board meeting concerns began circulating. What she found was not what she expected. Company accounts had been used to fund hotel stays, private flights, and expensive dinners that Daniel listed as client entertainment but which had no corresponding client records attached. The amounts were not enormous, but they were consistent, and they were clearly personal. More troubling for Vanessa was what she found in Daniel's private accounts. He had been spending far beyond what the company's actual performance supported. Either the company was hiding profits she didn't know about, or Daniel had been living as though he were richer than he was. Vanessa was a practical woman. She had been drawn to Daniel's confidence and position. Now the position was cracking and the confidence was beginning to look more like performance than fact. She didn't end things with him. She was too careful for that. She stayed close and kept smiling in public. But she stopped sharing her plans with him. She began making quiet calls to people who had no connection to Daniel's world. She started building her own exit before anyone realized she was looking for the door. I walked back into Reeves and Company for the first time in months on a bright Tuesday morning in October. I came as part of the formal Veilbridge acquisition review, accompanied by Evelyn and a records analyst from Marcus's team. The acquisition process had its own legal authority, and I had every right to be present. The lobby went quiet when I came through the door. Not the uncomfortable quiet of pity. Something different. The receptionist looked up and then smiled, a real smile, the kind a person gives someone they are genuinely glad to see. I recognized people in the hallway. They recognized me. I saw it in the way a few caught my eye and gave a small nod that said more than words would have. These were people who remembered the nights I stayed late fixing proposals. They remembered the investor calls Daniel took credit for. They remembered the woman who solved the problem before anyone knew there was one. Naomi walked beside me carrying the folder of staff statements. I signed in at the front desk and said to the receptionist, "I'm here to review the records that Mr. Reeves stated I had no involvement with." She handed me a lanyard without hesitation. "Of course, Ms. Bennett. Follow me, please." I followed her down the hallway I had walked hundreds of times before, toward the records office. I did not look back. The records analyst found the email chain in the archived server files on the second day of the review. It was from 5 years earlier. Daniel had sent it to me at 11:47 at night, and the subject line was simply, "Urgent," before the board meeting. I read it again for the first time in years. His words were plain and unguarded, the words of a frightened man writing to the only person he trusted when he had no one else to turn to. "The numbers aren't telling the right story," he had written. "The board is going to ask questions I can't answer. I need you to fix the model before 9 tomorrow morning. Cannot do this without you. Please." The attachments were mine. 3 files, all created by me, all timestamped that same night between midnight and 5 in the morning. The final version of the financial model Daniel presented to the board the next morning was the one I had built while he slept. Evelyn stood beside me when the analyst opened the files on screen. She read the email once, then turned to me. "Claire," she said quietly, "this changes everything." I looked at the timestamp. I looked at my name in the metadata of every attached file. "No," I said. "It confirms everything. There is a difference between those two things." Daniel came to my apartment on a Thursday evening alone. No lawyer with him. No Vanessa. He rang the bell, and I looked at the intercom screen and almost did not answer. Then I decided I wanted to hear what he had to say, so I let him up. He looked smaller in my doorway than I remembered. He looked like a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a long time and had just realized there was no one left to help him carry it. He said the dinner had gotten out of hand. He said Vanessa had pressured him into it. He said he had been under enormous stress and had never meant to make me feel worthless. I listened. I nodded in some of the right places. He kept talking. He talked about the years we had shared and how things had changed gradually and how he had handled the change badly. Then, about 12 minutes in, he said the thing that told me exactly why he was really there. He asked me to consider delaying the legal filings until after the acquisition closed, because the ongoing dispute was affecting investor confidence in the review process. I looked at him for a moment without speaking. He was not sorry he had hurt me. He was sorry I had kept the evidence. I told him I wished him well. Then I closed the door before he could finish his next sentence. Marcus scheduled the final acquisition dinner for a Thursday evening at a private dining room in a hotel near the financial district. The guest list included Daniel, Vanessa, the Reeves and Company board members, senior staff, legal representatives from both sides, and the full Veilbridge advisory team. Daniel accepted the invitation immediately. He told Vanessa it would be his night. He said Marcus Vail would announce the deal, confirm his leadership, and put everything back in order. He bought a new tie. Vanessa bought a new dress. My invitation arrived by email from Marcus's assistant on a Tuesday morning. The subject line read, "Final acquisition dinner. Advisory team attendance confirmed." My name appeared at the top of the advisory team list, in bold. I read it twice. Then I sent Marcus a one-line reply. "I'll be there." I called Evelyn to confirm the legal filings would proceed on schedule regardless of the dinner's outcome. She confirmed. I called Naomi and told her what was happening. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Wear something that makes you feel like yourself." Thought about it. I knew exactly what I was going to wear. Not the blue dress Daniel had once chosen for me. Something I had picked out for myself a year before the divorce dinner, that I had never yet had an occasion to put on. Daniel walked into the private dining room with Vanessa on his arm and certainty all over his face. The room was already half full. Board members stood in small groups. Veilbridge advisors sat along one side of the long table. Soft lighting. Fresh flowers. The kind of setting Daniel had always believed he deserved. He came through the door, and his eyes swept the room looking for the most important person to greet first. He found Marcus Vail at the head of the table. Then his eyes moved to the chair beside Marcus. I was already seated. I arrived 40 minutes early. I was wearing a dark green dress I had chosen for myself, with my hair down the way I preferred when no one had asked me to do anything differently. There was a glass of water in front of me and the Veilbridge acquisition folder open to the advisory summary page. My name was at the top. Daniel stopped walking. Vanessa took a half step forward before she realized he had stopped and pulled back. His smile faltered and rebuilt itself, less certain than before. Vanessa looked at me, then at Daniel, then at Marcus, then back at me. The calculation was moving behind her eyes in real time. Marcus stood and welcomed Daniel warmly. Then he introduced me to the room as the advisor whose analysis had made the acquisition possible. Daniel laughed. He said I used to help with things around the house. Marcus opened the folder without reacting to Daniel's comment. He read the email aloud. The midnight email. The one where Daniel wrote that he could not make the numbers tell the right story. The one where he said he could not do it without me. The one where he asked me please to fix everything before 9 in the morning. The room was very quiet. Evelyn placed the metadata reports on the table. The analyst placed the archived drafts beside them. The timestamps. The version histories. The 93 files are organized by date and category. Daniel's face had stopped performing by then. It was just a face. Vanessa's had changed too, but in a different direction. When a board member asked Daniel directly about the account irregularities, Daniel turned to Vanessa and said she had encouraged the spending and pressured him into public announcements before he was ready. Vanessa set her fork down. She looked at Daniel for 3 full seconds. Then she said, clearly and without heat, that Daniel had promised her equity after the divorce and had told her I would be too embarrassed to fight back. She said she had documentation. I did not look at either of them. I looked at the table. Then I spoke. For years, Daniel let everyone believe I stood behind him because I had nothing to offer. The truth is I stood behind him because someone had to hold the company together. No one in the room had anything to add to that. Marcus announced that Veilbridge would proceed with the acquisition. The board accepted the terms. Due to governance failures, financial misuse, and the pending legal claims, Daniel would be removed as CEO after closing. He sat very still while this was read aloud. He stared at the board like betrayal was something only he was allowed to feel. Afterward, Daniel signed the revised divorce settlement. He signed a document acknowledging my unpaid strategic contributions to Reeves and Company. He agreed to fair compensation. He agreed to put in writing, officially and permanently, that I had helped build the company. Months later, Marcus offered me a senior executive role at Veilbridge. I thanked him and negotiated my own terms instead. Then I launched my own strategic advisory firm for founders and builders whose work had been buried under louder names. Naomi joined me as operations lead. At the final closing ceremony, Daniel attended as a former CEO with no remaining authority. Vanessa was not there. His title was gone. His office was gone. When it was over, he found me in the corridor and said quietly, "I didn't know you were capable of all this." I looked at him for a moment. Then I smiled. Real one. The kind that comes from someone who no longer needs anything from the person standing in front of them. That was always your problem, Daniel. You only saw the ordinary because ordinary was all you deserved to see. Then I walked out. Not as the wife he had discarded. As the woman who helped buy the company he lost.